Welcome to Rangers Daily. I'm Todd Werwa. Please subscribe and ring the bell below so you can get updates every time we post a new episode. Today we're talking a few different things. First, let's start with Braden Schneider, who was back after a long time out with a torn labrum in his shoulder. Hadn't played since April 12th, and he looked pretty good against the Islanders at UBS Arena. He was a first pair defenseman with Urho Vakanainen. Overall, he played 20 minutes and 40 seconds at even strength, 22:51 overall. Now, at even strength, they were outshot 27-11, but Urho and Braden aren't really your first pair defensemen, and they were going against a pretty full stacked New York Islanders lineup. Pretty much outside of Anders Lee, looked a lot like what you'll see in the regular season from the Islanders. Certainly not the case on the Rangers. On the Rangers side with their lineup, his expected goals against, thanks to natural stat trick, was .99, which was the highest on the team. But it is preseason, and again, he's not a top pair guy. Some of it was hurt by Vakanainen, who got burned a few times by some guys with speed. It looked wouldn't say it looked ugly at times, but it was a little tough to watch at times, especially that first period. It was tough to watch, even though the Rangers did wind up with the lead. But wanted to share with you a quote that Colin Stevenson from Newsday posted from Schneider on playing his first game since April 12th. He said, "All I'm thinking about for the last 6 months basically is wanting to get back and be healthy and play hockey again. And to go out there and kind of get thrown into the fire against a full NHL lineup, it definitely knocked the rust off me a bit." Mike Sullivan and Schneider acknowledged there are a couple of preseason games left, so there's still some time to knock a little more of that rust off and sort of decrease the time between what the mind wants and what the body does, right? When it just comes naturally, everything flows, and that's when you're playing at your best self. Right now, with a little bit of rust, that's what he's talking about, is you want to do something, then the body says, all right, now I have to do it. You think a little bit too much. You don't just react instinctively. So that's what Schneider's going through right now. I think he looked pretty good. It was great to see him back out there. He's a vital part of this defense core. Now, the question is, can he make it to the second pair, or is that Will Borgen's and probably Carson Soucy's to lose? Or, is he and Vakanainen, are they the third pair? We'll see. There's still time. Mike Sullivan will still rotate. There's still, like I said, a couple of preseason games left, so we'll see where it goes. And he can rotate in game as well and rotate as the season goes along. But Schneider, definitely great to have him back. Definitely great to see him playing strong, unafraid to hit, and also see him playing at close to regular season pace. And obviously it's a preseason game, but because of the Islanders lineup, it was a little more like a regular season game than some of the earlier preseason games. So that was my takeaway from seeing him back. I really thought it was a good debut, and again, thrilled to have him back. Now, Tuesday was cut down day, so a lot of people going to Hartford, trimmed down to 29 players. The biggest name is probably Brennan Othmann. There's still, in the forward group, there is still some youth. Berard, Brisson, Laba, and Perreault still there. Connor Sherry, who's on a PTO, he's also still in that forward group. The overall total is 29. But Othmann's the first of the young guys to go to Hartford. And I wouldn't say it was a surprise, but I would say it's disappointing that he didn't make, quote unquote, the final round of cuts. I think everyone felt he was probably the first guy to go, that he didn't out and out win a job, and the way it looked, he's probably not ready. But let me go back again to the X-File from Vince Mercogliano, with some interesting quotes from Mike Sullivan about what he said to Othmann and sort of what Othmann needs to do in order to make this lineup at some point this year. Sullivan gave some pretty detailed answers as to why they sent Othmann down and where he stands in his development. The gist is he believes the 22-year-old is still going through, quote, the exploratory process of figuring out what style of game best suits him in the NHL. Sullivan said that him, like many other young players, are used to being the primary offensive option at lower levels. So the key now is learning conscientious play, attention to detail, defensively away from the puck, playing within structure, having some predictability and reliability and dependability around his game. They want to see Othman trusted. And something from Colin Stevenson from Newsday. Sullivan has said he's had a number of discussions with Othman about what he has to do to be a Ranger. It's attention to detail in all zones on both sides of the puck, in particular on the defensive end of the puck, defensive side of the puck. So there's some reliability with respect to that. As I said to Otter, just because this decision was made today doesn't mean that there's finality to it and that the opportunity no longer exists. It very much exists and will continue to exist, and we will continue to work with Otter. So that's a good sign. I think Mike Sullivan's recognizing, and Othman should recognize, I'm showing my skills. They like what they see offensively. But this game, especially if you're going to be a third line wing, this game is all about being a 200-foot player. And it's all about being dependable in the structure and knowing what the setup is and where to be at each moment on the ice, but also knowing your responsibilities in the defensive end, whether it's getting back to back check or just in your own zone as the other team has offensive zone time. That's got to be the part of the game that needs the most improvement, and the part of the game, especially as a third liner, that's going to be what the coaches are looking for. And they clearly don't see it yet. The stuff about being a primary offensive person, you see it in a lot of other sports, right? You see the 6'6" high school basketball player who just dominates because he's kind of taller than everybody. And then he gets to college and he realizes, wait, I can't do everything I want and I have to adjust. Maybe I played more down low in high school. Now I've got to move out and play a little more on the wing at the next level. Or even you see it sometimes in college where, those 6'8", 6'9" guys can dominate inside, and then they get to the NBA, get drafted, and they're in amongst 6'10", 6'11", 7 foot, 7'2", and you've got to adapt your game. You can't be just, one kind of offensive player. You have to be better on the defensive end. You're playing against different guys. And it's the same thing here with that he wants to tell Othman. Listen, you've been that guy for probably close to as long as you've been playing hockey. But at some point, you've got to figure out a different way to get it done while becoming more rounded. Listen, the best example is someone Sully had in Sidney Crosby, who's a fourth line guy in a first line body, and is clearly on the Mount Rushmore of best players to ever play the game. He's legitimately one of my favorites because he plays a 200-foot game. He has every skill that a first line center needs, and he plays with the defensive skill, defensive responsibility of a third and fourth liner. And that's what they want to see from Othman. They want to see him being that third line guy that's dependable on the back check, that doesn't give up chances. And then when it's time for goals, we know you can score, but you have to work it around putting yourself in the right position. So that's my thought on Othman, why he's probably gone so quickly. But I have no doubt, honestly, that we'll see him at some point this season. Next point, just wanted to touch on Noah Laba's overtime game-winning goal, and he played much of the game with Othman, but he wound up in 3-on-3 overtime with Gabe Perreault, and Perreault made an unbelievable pass to him. The Islanders wound up going 2-on-1 on Perreault and kind of left Laba to come around Matthew Schaefer with a whole lot of speed. Schaefer had blown by people with his speed during the game. It's so noticeable how good of a skater he is. But Laba came by and he was going so fast, he knew he had to go far post because he was coming in fast and coming in wide, and just forehand, backhand, tuck the puck in. It was a gorgeous OT goal, and I think it was it was something the Rangers dearly needed. Not just the win, but the surprise story of camp, scoring after they'd blown third period leads in turned out third straight game, right? Because they were up 2-1 in the third period against the Islanders and allowed the tying goal. And so, even though it wasn't a 3-goal third period like it was the prior couple of games, it was still another blown third period lead. I think the team kind of really needed not just to win, not just to win in that way, in overtime to walk out of UBS winners over the Islanders, but to have a guy that has just taken everybody by storm during camp. I think it was just a tremendous way to sort of kick off this final week of the preseason and lead into the October 7th opener. And finally, want to do a little, won't call it Random Ranger, but go back a little in the history books. And I was trying to think of sort of a comp for Matt Rempe and his folk hero status. And there are a bunch of guys that you could choose from, but the one that came to my mind was Nick Fotiu. Late 70s, early 80s, was the first native New Yorker to play for the Rangers. Was born in Staten Island, did some Golden Gloves boxing when he was growing up, so he kind of knew how to fight. Big 6'2", 210 pounds, so not nearly as big as Rempe. Rempe's obviously a giant compared to that, but for his day that was big. But he was just a grinder and a fighter, and he played 8 years for the Rangers, and he never had more than 10 goals in a season in his career. He played 455 games for the Rangers, had 103 points, 41 goals, 62 assists, finished up a minus 42, but had 970 penalty minutes. If you want to enjoy some YouTube time after you're done watching this podcast, search Nick Fotiu fight, and you'll find a couple of great ones. And the crowd, just every time Nicky was on the ice, just the crowd loved it. They knew it was coming, either a hard hit, a fight, something big. The same way the crowd sort of comes to the edge of their seat when Matt Rempe's on the ice. Bleacher Report ranked the 50th toughest NHL players ever, and Fotiu was ranked 40th in that survey. And, I kind of think at the end of Rempe's career, he might very well be on that, eventually find his way on that list. So that's my comp. Please leave in the comments down below who you think maybe Matt Rempe might comp to in terms of being a folk hero. Not necessarily talking about his game, not necessarily talking about his skating ability or anything like that. Just being that kind of folk hero that may not make the difference on the score sheet all the time, but is somebody that you see his jersey everywhere. They cheer every time he hits the ice. He almost can do no wrong. That's the kind of player Nick Fotiu was as a Ranger, and that's the kind of player that Matt Rempe is. If you can think of some other good comps, please leave them in the comments below, and I'll be sure to get to them in one of our future Rangers Daily episodes. So that's it for this edition. Thursday, the Rangers are home at MSG to face the Devils. Cannot wait, because it means we're one step closer to the regular season. This has been Rangers Daily. I'm Todd Werwa. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time.